Ride or die.
Many claim they like riding, but I know that they ain't.
Ride or die.
I go hard in the paint, yeah, homie, I'm a saint.
Ride or die.
Many claim they like riding, but I know that they ain't. They see the red and they call me a devil, but mind the treble, let me level with you. I used to idolize rappers that paint they face, but now I rock the blood of Christ ever since I've been saved by grace.
Talk to him. Talk to him.
Yeah, that's it's very upbeat music. Not everybody has a rapper friend who can hook them up with one of their soundtracks, so I appreciate it.
Who was that?
His name is Jay Payne. He was a juggalo when he was younger, and we go to an outreach every year at the gathering of the juggalos, and we pass out Fago T-shirts, pray for people.
Gang. That's cool. Aren't one of those guys a Christian?
So they're not a Christian, but they talk sometimes like they're a Christian, but there are Christians within the community. And
Yeah.
our job is to let them know that, because they're a neglected, abused group. Like, some people don't care about them. I mean, hell, the FBI labels them a gang.
Yeah, we had a friend, Ian, that the clown thing Ian used to have. That's that crew. Yeah, that's that crew. Yeah, we had a friend that in a downtown ministry reached out to, ended up getting saved or whatnot, and he would talk about how the cops would jam him up and do all types of like they were treating him like us. So I'm like, man, that's pretty crazy. You gotta get treated like us. But yeah, it was the clown tattoo and everything. I mean, the juggalo tattoo. ICP.
And let's say you happen to do something stupid, like kids do.
Yeah.
If you do that, but because you have the ICP tattoo or an ICP memorabilia, that's considered gang affiliation.
What?
Which means that the crime and the penalty for you is increased. It can ruin your lives. And in some places, it's cost people their kids because of the way the federal government's treating this group.
Yeah, that's crazy.
What in the world?
RICO statutes, all that. Yeah, it's pretty crazy.
Mm-hmm.
So those guys created a monster. For show.
So we can hop right into it. Talking about Binatarianism and the Old Testament and how that relates to Trinitarianism and the New Testament.
Yeah, so some of your friends are going to get at you because it's Binatarianism.
You gotta forgive me. It's my Midwestern. I'm dyslexic. And any other excuse I can make for not pronouncing things appropriately.
a couple of my rock star friends, like, you'd recognize them if I told you. A couple of them are dyslexic too, because we texted stuff. I'm like, holy smokes. So it's all, don't worry about it. Okay, so yeah, well, the Trinity has always been a very fascinating concept to me, but the standard idea that I had about the Trinity was that, God was pretty much strictly monadic or monotheist in the Old Testament. And then all of a sudden, this New Testament, we get this revelation that actually there are multiple persons in the Godhead. And I've been a Christian all my life, so I didn't really have a problem with it. Especially many of us were raised pretty much starting from the book of Matthew. And so that's what I believed for a very, very long time. And then I think about 10 years ago, I think it was, I discovered Dr. Michael Heiser. I don't know if you're familiar with him.
Yeah, I think I've read some of the things by him, although a lot of my Trinitarian resources have been primarily focused on the philosophical end. And then I like James White for the theological, but Michael Heisner does a lot of great things with the Old Testament.
Yeah, exactly. Definitely Forgotten Trinity is probably the seminal work of our generation, I think, as far as theology. And there is some philosophy there, distinction between persons and being, comes from the Forgotten Trinity. Have you read that book, The Forgotten Trinity?
Yeah, absolutely. I actually own that one. The big critic of the Trinity, I also bought his book, which was Dale Tuggy.
Yep.
And so I had him on the channel. Actually went through some of his formulations and different things. Not directly when I was on the channel. I kind of wanted him to lay out the Unitarian position so
Yeah.
audience could get familiar with it. But yeah, he would probably be, if I was to say who is the most knowledgeable Unitarian in the world, it would probably be Dale Tuggy.
Yeah. So, yeah, so that's where I came from, and I was completely fine with that. Like, hey, God reveals himself progressively. So, if God, kept it secret in the Old Testament, then revealed it in the New, I was cool with that. But then, you have these things called angelophanies or theophanies, or later, Christophanies in the Old Testament. That already from a Christian worldview, there's a bunch of literature about that. What I did not know, was Michael Heiser's contribution to my growth, was that in the Jewish world, particularly the Second Temple Jewish world, which is the Judaism of Jesus, there was this concept of the two powers in heaven. And there's a book by an author named Siegel, who's a Jew, by the way, and it's called The Two Powers in Heaven. And he essentially makes the point that binatarianism, this idea that there were two powers, and when we say powers, that's basically the Hebrew word for the term Elohim. As a matter of fact, you have some translations where it'll say Yahweh is my power, instead of Yahweh is my God. So yeah, in Second Temple Judaism, you had this concept of the two powers, and there were all these candidates. Was it Melchizedek? Was it Gabriel? Some said it was Adam. Some said it was Moses. Some said it was the angel of the Lord. There's a very mysterious figure by the name of Metatron. And Metatron is this mysterious, divine, angelic type being. And so there was all this speculation in Second Temple Judaism, and you were completely fine with holding to that view until the end of the first century. And the reason for that is obvious. It's because the Christians were saying, that's true. And it's our guy. Our guy is the second power. And so after that, it became a heresy to say that, because they were convincing these strictly monotheistic Jews that Jesus was a divine being and still able to maintain their Jewish identity. Remember, the first controversy in the church, and you can see this clearly in Acts 15, was baptizing Gentiles. Peter baptizes Cornelius, and there's an entire church council that has to get held in order to justify Peter baptizing this Gentile. So my point in saying that is to say that the first Christians viewed themselves as Jews, and for whatever reason, they didn't have a problem with worshiping Christ and still calling themselves monotheists. And the reason for that is, in part, is because of the doctrine of the two powers, that this was already an extant view within Judaism. And this was already an acceptable view within Judaism. Obviously, because of the spread of Christianity, it got anathematized by the end of the first century. And Alan Siegel, who wrote that book, The Two Powers in Heaven, who, by the way, was a Jew, never converted to Christianity, called those people sectarians, whatever, called them heretics, but admits, yeah, this was a view, and he goes into all the historical, Talmudic and other Mishnaic proofs, etc., and conversations among rabbis about these two powers in heaven. So what I wanted to do, though, was, because I'm a Bible guy, what I wanted to do was just kind of do a little bit of a Old Testament survey and see the evidence of these two powers, and then see how the New Testament authors explicitly drew from that doctrine when they started talking, if that's okay.
No, that sounds good, because the typical thing that we're charged with as Christians is that we do not hold to monotheism.
Right.
And that the Jews had a strict form of monotheism. But
Right.
when you look through the text, even things like God being on earth or manifestation, they would not have a problem with that.
Correct.
It would be something very common, like even when like the smoke would lift up and then would move on. So when Muslims try to give characteristics to God, but say that there's no way God can be within this reality, meaning that like he has to put like a representation of his voice, but it's not his voice.
Right.
It's just nothing that I think the Jewish conception would hold to. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to some of the information you share.
I do think, as a side note, it's a problem for Islam, because you have a multiplicity of persons in the Godhead that interact with human beings directly. In the Old Testament, which we'll see in a second, you have the same issue in the intertestamental period. And then during the time of Jesus, you have the exact same thing. And then obviously the New Testament has the exact same thing. But then you get to the Islam and it's vastly different. There's a vast discontinuity. And obviously Islam purports to be the continuation. But right from the book of Genesis, which we'll see in a moment, God does come down to the earth. He does interact with human beings and he doesn't do it rarely. He does it on almost all the major moments in Israel's history and with Israel's prophets. And again, this is the Old Testament world. This was the Old Testament of Christ and Paul and Peter and John and Philo and all the rest of these guys. So on a side note, I think that there's a historic discontinuity in Islam when it deals with monotheism. There's a cool Jewish guy, Dr. Michael Brown. I don't know if you're familiar with him. And he doesn't use the term Trinitarian necessarily because he still does apologetics with Hasidic Jews, but he uses the term God who is complex in his unity, which I think is a pretty cool way of talking about Trinitarianism, that God is complex in his unity. But anyway, so here are two very strange kind of poles that you see in the Old and the New Testament. In Deuteronomy chapter, I think it's 4, God says to the Israelites, you saw no form, right? So Deuteronomy 4:15, God says, you saw no form of any kind on the day that Yahweh spoke to you out of the fire at Horeb. So Yahweh is the proper name for, and I know you know this, I'm just saying it to your audience. I'm sure most of your audience knows this. You guys are pretty sophisticated. But Yahweh, hey, what's up, Cyrus? Yahweh is God's proper name. Your name is James, my name is Vin, her name is Sarah. Sorry. That's Yahweh's proper name. When you're dealing with Jehovah's Witnesses, they'll say Jesus is God, but he's not Jehovah or Yahweh. And you guys will see in a moment why that's important. But if you look at Deuteronomy 4:15, God says, therefore watch yourselves carefully, since you saw no form on the day that the Lord spoke to you at Horeb out of the midst of the fire. Beware lest you act corruptly by making carved images for yourselves in any figure, the likeness of male or female, the likeness of animal, etc., etc. So there's God saying, hey, I showed up. You saw no form. I'm formless. Don't make any images representing me. And then you also see something very similar, actually, in the New Testament. In John chapter 1, John makes the very strange statement, no one has ever seen God. In John chapter 1, I think verse 18. So that is very interesting. So you've got an aspect of God that is invisible, immaterial, and formless. At the same time, though, right from the beginning of the Bible, you also have an aspect of God that does take form right in Genesis 3, because after Adam and Eve sin and they're in the garden, it says, the man and his wife heard the voice of the Lord God walking in the garden, in the breeze, in the cool of the day. So there's one aspect of God where it's like, hey, he's formless. Yeah, he's completely transcendent, right? Then there's another aspect of God where he's on the ground in Eden and he's having a conversation with Adam and Eve in the garden. And so that kind of starts off this strange, quote unquote, contradiction. And the way that the Jews, particularly in the intertestamental period, put this together was to say that Yahweh in his prime is completely and totally transcendent. And in order for him to communicate to any of his created beings, including angels and other divine beings like the seraphim and the cherubim, is that he has to sort of emanate himself into their lower form so as to communicate with them. So it's him and an emanation right from his nature in order to relate to them, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, I'm definitely following along.
So here's something that is interesting that happens. And again, to your point, in Islam, God is almost barred from his own creation. Like it's impossible for him to interface with his own creation, which is a strange thing for me. I had I don't want to say it was a debate, but a conversation with a good Muslim friend, I don't know, like a couple of years ago, where the Quran says that Allah was in the fire talking to Musa, to Moses, on the earth. And I was quoting, Ibn Kathir, who was quoting Ibn Abbas, who was saying that no, Allah was in the fire. But for some reason, modern Muslims, they want to completely ban Allah from the created order, which but that's okay. So here's one of my favorite stories, right? Is that God shows up, and it specifically says that Yahweh shows up to Abraham by the trees of Mamre. I'm sure you're familiar with this story in the book of Genesis, right? In Genesis chapter 18.
Mm-hmm.
And God shows up and he's talking about hey, I'm talking to you about your wife, she's going to get pregnant, yada yada yada. It's clear there that Yahweh is speaking. It says Yahweh and two angels show up to Abraham, right, by the trees of Mamre. Genesis chapter 18, starting from verse 1 and 2. God appeared to Abraham at the oaks of Mamre while he's sitting at the entrance of his tent in the hottest part of the day. And it says he sees three men standing, right? That passage is really, 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 really important, because it says right there, and again, it uses the divine name in Genesis 18:1. It says Yahweh appeared to him. So it's very clear there that that's going to happen. So he talks to Abraham about the promise. So it's Yahweh is on earth with two men, which we know are angels in this story, because we know what's about to happen in Sodom. And then Yahweh says, shall I hide from Abraham what I am about to do? And if you go down to verse 20, it says, Yahweh said, because the outcry against Sodom and Gomorrah is great and their sin is very grave, I will go down to see whether they have done all together according to the outcry that has come to me. And if not, I will know. So Yahweh specifically states, I am going to go down to Sodom, right? So he's got Yahweh, you got two angels. I'm going down to Sodom. I think at this point, I will attempt to do a screen share just so that you guys can follow along.
Yep, I got my Bible opened up on the side. If you share the screen, then I can add it up for you.
Yeah, actually, you share your Bible, because I have to do all this preference stuff with my thing. It's going to take a million years. I don't have share preferences on, and I'm horrible with the computer, so we'll just track with yours. What do you got, an ESV?
I have an ESV off to the side. I can't do a screen share on it though.
Bible, I think.
Oh, okay. So let me attempt to do the screen share then.
I'm not as technically savvy. I've been getting helpful from RNGD Gaming in the chat. Paul, welcome. Ajax, yeah. Square Circles, thanks for joining us this morning.
Okay, I think I should be able to do it. Let me know if you could see it. As soon as you could see it, let me know if you could see the screen.
Yep, just like this. Now, anything on your screen will appear, and you should be able to slide and manipulate that.
Okay. So as soon as you see the screen, just let me know.
Oh, it's up on the. It's up.
Okay, perfect.
It's very tiny, so make sure you guys turn your phone sideways and zoom in. But
Does that help? Because I full screened it.
yeah, I think it's just a negative consequence of YouTube and tiny phone screens.
I got you. Yeah, it's to turn it sideways, ladies and gents. I'll try to blow it up a little bit. But you see there where Yahweh's saying in verse when you guys see capital Lord in the Old Testament, that's the divine name. And remember, the Jews had such a high regard for God's name that they wouldn't use it. And that actually becomes very helpful soon as well, because to this day, very Orthodox Jews and Jews that take God seriously won't use the divine name. They'll say Adonai, which means Lord or Master, or they'll say Hashem, which means the name, which is going to be very important for our conversation. Okay, so there you see right there. Yahweh is talking to the two guys that are with him, because you remember you saw up there. He lifted up his eyes and he saw three men standing in front of him. Okay. So then you go to verse 20. Yahweh says, I am going to go down to Sodom and check to see if these folks are as horrible as people are, as the outcry is. So then it says, the men turned from there and went to Sodom, but Abraham still stood before the Lord. So the two guys go down to Sodom before Yahweh. Yahweh hangs back, and they have the conversation where Lot says, listen, are you going to sweep away the righteous with the wicked? And then he starts negotiating with Yahweh about the price, and then the conversation, about the deal. If there are 10 righteous men, I'll spare the city. And then the conversation's over. So the two angels, or the two men, go down, and then presumably Yahweh has to catch up with them. Okay, so that's Genesis 18. In Genesis 19, we see what happens. It says the two angels came to Sodom in the evening. So you see clearly there, and we all know the story. I'm not going to get into it. The angels try to gang rape the visitors, and not the angels. I'm sorry, the Sodomites.
I was just getting ready to come in. I was like, we're reading a different Bible at that point.
The men of Sodom try to gang rape these angels, and the angels are saying, "Let's get out of here. Take up your wife." Verse 15, and they're going right now. Remember, Yahweh was on the earth, and he specifically said, I'm going to go down there and check to see if the outcry is that bad. The two angels went on ahead of him, and presumably Yahweh follows behind and is observing all this stuff, right? And the men of Sodom, unfortunately, validate the outcry that was against them. And then you see this very strange verse in Genesis chapter 19, verse 24. Look at verse 24. It says, then Yahweh, because remember it's L-O-R-D in all caps, rained on Sodom and Gomorrah sulfur and fire from Yahweh out of heaven. So it says Yahweh rained down fire on Sodom and Gomorrah from Yahweh out of heaven. Now, if you go to kabod.org, which is it's a Jewish website.
How do you spell that?
CHABOD, kabod.org. So I'm just going to type in kabod.org, Genesis 18. That's a Jewish website, because a person might say, well, that's a Christian interpolation or translation, because they're trying to sneak some multiplicity in there. Here's kabod.org, and I'm going to go to Genesis chapter 19. Really, really fascinating stuff. If you look down in kabod.org, you'll see it again. It says, the Lord caused to rain down upon Sodom and Gomorrah brimstone and fire from the Lord from heaven. So that passage is just one example of the multitudes of times where it appears you have two persons being called Yahweh who are working together. The Lord rained down fire from the Lord out of heaven. And the author specifically says out of heaven. Why? I would say because we know that there was one Yahweh on the earth. There was one Yahweh on the earth that was interacting with Abraham and all the rest of it. And then he was sent down to see whether or not Sodom was as evil as it was claimed that they were. And unfortunately, the Sodomites gave that evidence. And so basically, long story short, it appears that the Yahweh on earth said, yep, they're that bad. Pull the trigger. And so Yahweh in heaven says, Roger that. And they work together to work the destruction of that place. Now, what was really interesting is that when the prophets, or when God looks back at this event, you see something really, really, really interesting in Amos chapter 4, verse 11. And did I stopped sharing, didn't I?
Yes, but I can put it back if you start sharing again.
Check this out in Amos chapter 4, verse 11, because what God hundreds of years later is looking back at this action. And he says, I overthrew some of you as I overthrew Sodom and Gomorrah. That's how the NIV translates it. But that is not actually what the literal Hebrew says. Check it out. It says, I overthrew some of you as God overthrew Sodom and Gomorrah. You even see this in the New King James Version, the King James Version. It's, I overthrew some of you as God overthrew Sodom and Gomorrah. So in that passage, it appears that Yahweh is talking about somebody else who overthrew Sodom and Gomorrah, saying, I overthrew some of you Israelites as God overthrew Sodom and Gomorrah. And when you look at Genesis 19:24, there are two individuals, two persons named Yahweh. And when Yahweh looks back at it, he goes, I overthrew some of you as God overthrew Sodom and Gomorrah. So this led, and there are so many passages like this in the Old Testament. This led now you see why the Jews, particularly in the intertestamental period, when they had the entire canon of the Old Testament, started going, what is going on here? Who are these two Yahwehs? Who are these two powers? And why would Yahweh do this? And how do we reconcile the fact that on the one hand, Yahweh says, you saw no form. And in traditional Judaism, you know, the same guy who wrote Genesis is the same guy who wrote Deuteronomy. You saw no form. But then you've got Yahweh interacting as a man, as a human being, because it says he saw three men. So Yahweh does take on the form of a human being. How do we reconcile this? Same thing with John chapter 1. John says no man has seen God, but there's all these passages in the Old Testament where we do see God. What's going on? Moses spoke with God face to face as a man speaks with his friend, etc., etc. What's going on? And the answer was, oh, okay, so you've got Yahweh in his prime, and then he emanates his nature. It's still him, but he emanates himself in such a way as to be able to relate to his lesser creation, not just humanity, but angels, etc., etc. Did you have any questions before you get to the next verse?
No, it's going well. I think we're slowly moving towards the conclusion where we can connect that to the New Testament, which
go ahead.
Which I always find interesting, because a lot of people are like, well, the modern day Jews have kept their tradition. But then I'm like, go open up any rabbinical work and see how many times they've changed or adapted their views as the history flowed.
Oh, I mean, yeah. Look, ever since 70 AD, Judaism has been almost unrecognizable from the biblical Judaism. So I mean, we could talk about that in another show, but yeah, I completely agree with you. This idea that our Judaism has maintained its longstanding traditions or its fidelity to the scriptures is completely untrue. It's just not. Otherwise, there's no reason to have the oral law in conjunction with the written law. But again, that's a separate conversation. Exodus chapter 3. I was in a debate with some Black Israelites. I don't know if you're familiar with the Black Israelites.
They're all over Clubhouse, and they all want to reassure me that I will be treated fairly as I'm a slave for them when their paradise comes. And they have let me know that. They said, you're a good guy. We'll make sure the work is light. And I'm not even kidding when I tell you this. This is from them.
Well, that was nice of them.
Yeah. And of course, Ajax is correct. No human mind can completely comprehend Allah. But the fact that Ajax can say nobody can comprehend Allah is something that he comprehends about Allah. So the fact that he believes that Allah is one is something that he can comprehend about Allah because he knows what oneness is. So yes, no human mind can comprehensively or completely comprehend Allah. But we have to keep both philosophies of transcendence, which means that Allah or God is above and beyond us, and immanence, that is to say that Allah communicates with us in tension. And so Muslims do it by a chain of revelation called Wahi, where Allah speaks to Jibril and then Jibril speaks to Muhammad. But of course, logically speaking, the gap between Jibril and Muhammad to Allah are exactly the same. There's an infinite gap between God's created beings and God's creation. So if Allah can communicate to Jibril, and we know that in Muhammad's night journey, that Sirat al-Miraj, that he communicated to Allah directly, because there's that story where Muhammad is negotiating with Allah about how many daily prayers. There were 50 daily prayers. Then he goes back to Moses. Moses says, how many prayers did he enjoin you? Muhammad says 50. Moses says, that's not going to work. Go back. And he basically negotiates the thing down to 5. And then Moses says, go back. And Muhammad says, I'm too shy to ask anymore to Allah. And then Allah says, you know what? Do 5 and I'll credit you 50, mashallah. So again, even in Islam, you have to find some way to your point where Allah is transcendent and somehow immanent, where he can communicate with his created beings. And so I understand, Ajax, that God is completely incomprehensible, but even in your theology, you have to find a way to make him immanent so that he can speak to his lesser creatures. A worm, a bed bug is closer. We are closer ontologically to a bed bug than Jibril is to Allah. So I would
I used the photograph example. So like, we're created in the image of God, in the same way that if somebody takes a photo of me, that is an image of me. It portrays me, but it is not me. And fundamentally, it is completely different from me, although there would be a slight similarity.
Yeah. And, you get into Kabbalah, things like that. You have the Sefirot, which is, again, God's emanations of himself to lesser beings in order to communicate with them. The big issue that a lot of our Jewish friends are trying to figure out is, how can the completely transcendent, immortal, invisible, eternal God, how can he communicate with lesser beings? And it didn't start with men. It started with angels. How could he do that? And so they said, well, he just emanates himself in a way that's comprehensible and visible and communicable to these lesser beings, where that emanation carries his essence and his message and his nature, but it's him and not him simultaneously. So we're all trying to feel this out and figure out how to make this happen. So here's Exodus chapter 3. Exodus chapter 3 is again a very, very big moment in Israelite history, obviously, right? Because this is the moment where Yahweh talks with the people of Israel, and this is when he says, all right, I'm gonna deliver you guys out of slavery. Okay. So here it is in Exodus chapter 3. It says, Moses is keeping the flock. This is the burning bush situation, and this is one of the ones where I talk to my Hebrew Israelite friends. And I'm sure you're very happy that you're just going to have light work because they like you.
It's strange too, because they're not even supposed to be talking with me about the scripture, but within the culture, there's an annoyance that I'm even handling the Bible, and
Yes.
so it's like I'm not supposed to do this, but we're really super annoyed, so we're going to do this anyway.
I mean, holy smokes, that's unbelievable. That's unbelievable. But that's okay. That's okay. Shout out to the Hebrew Israelites. That's probably which group of Hebrew Israelites were you dealing with?
So there's about 3 different groups on Clubhouse. There's like a big group that kind of hang out together. There's some subgroups that will have even prophets where they're like mini spin-offs, but then there's others that are very forceful that they are the true Jewish nation, that their religion has been co-opted. The Bible is not ours to touch. It's not written for us. It's for them exclusively. Um, they're very, very clear about that.
Yeah. I was watching one with James White where they said that King James was black. James White was caught off. The poor brother was caught off guard. He's like, "What? What are y'all talking about?" Shout out to the Hebrew Israelites.
This one lady comes on and she goes, "So what you're trying to tell us is that once you go black, you can't go back." And I'm like, "Okay." Next, so I don't engage with Hebrew Israelites that much anymore. I do some, but it's not as fruitful.
Yeah. I hear you. I hear you. Here's Jeremiah 50, guys. Just another one. So here's Yahweh talking again, and he says, "As when God overthrew Sodom and Gomorrah and their neighboring city, declares Yahweh, so no man shall dwell there, no son of man shall sojourn in her." So again, you have Yahweh raining down fire from Yahweh out of heaven, and then when Amos looks back at it, when God is looking back at it in Amos, he goes, just like God overthrew Sodom and Gomorrah. Again, Jeremiah looks back and he said, and then God said, and Yahweh says, when God overthrew Sodom and Gomorrah. It's very, very interesting. Okay, so it's 3 verses where it appears there are multiple persons who overthrew Sodom and Gomorrah. Okay, now you go to Exodus chapter 3. Exodus chapter 3, we know is the burning bush situation. And I always ask people, I said, who spoke to, ask Jehovah Witnesses or Arians or anyone who denies multiplicity in the Godhead. I say, who spoke to Moses out of the burning bush? They say Yahweh did, because that's a famous one where he gives tetragrammaton, YHVH, whatever, right? And so this is a very, very, very famous verse where Yahweh himself reveals the divine name to Moses. I said, who spoke to Moses out of the bush? Well, if you look at verse 2, it actually says, there the angel of Yahweh. Now, the term angel means literally in Hebrew means messenger. There the angel or the messenger of Yahweh appeared to him in a blazing fire from within a bush. Moses saw the bush ablaze with fire, but it was not consumed. Moses thought, I must go over and see this marvelous sight. Why is this bush not burning up? Verse 4, when Yahweh saw that he had gone over to look, God called him out from within the bush, Moses, Moses. And then go down, it says Moses hid his face. He was afraid to look at God. Now listen, there are times when angels show up on behalf of God, but there's always a distinction between the angel and God. In this passage, the angel is called Yahweh. It says the angel of Yahweh appears to him in a blazing fire from within the bush. And then verse 4 says, Yahweh saw that he had gone over to look. God called out to him from within the bush, Moses, Moses. So the being that's in the bush in verse 2 is called the angel of Yahweh. And then as the text goes on, the being is called Yahweh himself. The same thing happens in Judges chapter 6. In Judges chapter 6, the Midianites are getting oppressed, and I'm going to go to a more popular version, although all the versions say it, but the ESV is a very, very popular version. You go down to verse 11. It says, "Now the angel of Yahweh came and sat under the terebinth tree in Ophir, which belongs to Joaz the Abiezerite." And so there again, he's called the angel of Yahweh. But then in verse 14, you see, "And Yahweh turned to him and said, go in this might of yours and save Israel." And verse 16, "And Yahweh said to him." So the angel of Yahweh in Judges chapter 6 gets called by the divine name in the very text itself. And then what happens is Gideon does a sacrifice, and the angel of Yahweh goes up in the sacrifice, and then Gideon goes, "Oh my gosh, I've seen the face of God, I'm going to die." So again, you have this being who's called the angel of Yahweh, the messenger of Yahweh, so he's distinct from Yahweh somehow, but then he's called Yahweh himself. And so again, you have these multiple beings, which again, the intertestamental Jews had to really struggle and try to figure out what in the world is going on. Here's the last one I'll show you from the Old Testament, is Exodus 23. And this one is just unbelievable. I mean, it is insane in my opinion. And it's one of my favorites. Shout out to your little dog. Oh my gosh, she's so cute. Hello! I can't hear a word you're saying because you're on mute.
Yeah, I muted it just to want to say hi real quick.
Hi.
What's going on?
She's also trying to get into YouTube as well.
I have 2 YouTube channels, but one I haven't posted on for over a year. And it's on my phone.
You know what? Maybe we can do a collab, because one of our daughters is trying to start up her own YouTube channel, so maybe she could piggyback off of your fame.
She's got her 3rd subscriber the other day, and she's super excited.
Wait, I have a 3rd one? Yes. And soon we're making my next video and then going back to the Pokemon store for the next. And then we're going to make it a Pokemon in a fidget channel, okay?
Yep. Well, I'll let you go play, and I'll finish up my life.
Dad, now we have
2022, ladies and gents. Holy smokes, she's really beautiful though. I
feel old. You know that I have a 17-year-old turning 18-year-old this year at home.
That's crazy. That's crazy. I've got a 16-year-old turning 17, so you can't be that old, bro.
37.
There you go. Okay, so check this one out. Check this one out. Exodus chapter 23. This one is so fun. One of my favorite passages of all time. Then we'll get into some New Testament. Then I can land the plane for you. Cool? Okay, cool. So here's Exodus chapter 23. The Israelites are freed from the tyranny of Pharaoh, and they're about to transition into the promised land. And then Yahweh is speaking to Moses. "Behold, I send an angel before you to guard you on the way and to bring you to the place that I have prepared. Pay careful attention to him and obey his voice. Do not rebel against him, because he will not pardon your transgression, for my name is in him." Remember, to this day, Jews, Orthodox Jews, and even secular Jews who try to take their religion seriously will not mention the divine name. They won't say Yahweh or whatever. They'll either say Adonai, which means Lord, or they'll say Hashem, which means the name. Because obviously in the world of the Bible, particularly in the Old Testament, the name carries the nature. You know, the name of the Lord does this. You do this in the name of the Lord Jesus, et cetera, et cetera. It carries the nature of that person or being. So notice here, this angel has the name of God in him. There's no angel, Gabriel, Jibril, Raphael, Azrael, yada, yada. There's no other angel where it is said that they have the name of God literally in them. So notice this angel is a directing angel, He's the one that brings them to the place that Yahweh prepares. He should be obeyed, and he should not be rebelled against, and he has the power to forgive sin, because it says he will not pardon your transgression. Verse 22, but if you carefully obey his voice and do all that I say, then I will be an enemy to your enemies and an adversary to your adversaries. Look at verse 22. If you obey his voice and do all that I say. So there's this angel who what he says is equivalent to what Yahweh says, so that they're almost interchangeable. When my angel goes before you and brings you to the Amorites, the Hittites, the Perizzites, and the Canaanites, the Hivites, and Jebusites, and I blot them out, you shall not bow down to their gods, nor serve them, nor do as they do, but you shall utterly overthrow them and break their pillars in pieces. Watch this. You shall serve Yahweh your God, and he will bless your bread and your water, and I will take sickness from among you. Now, you see, there's a little textual in the Septuagint. They went with the I reading, so you shall serve Yahweh your God and I. But the Masoretic text actually has, you shall serve Yahweh your God, and he will bless your bread and your water, and I will take sickness from among you. So right there, it's unbelievable, but here we go. You've got Yahweh calling somebody else Yahweh, at least in the Masoretic text. You've got Yahweh calling somebody Yahweh. This is a guy that has Yahweh's name in him, etc. So again, there is so much speculation in the internet. Who is this second person, this second power who goes before us? Who is the and then look what happens in Judges chapter 1. This angel shows up and then he makes this claim about himself. So watch what happens in Judges chapter 1, because it's really, really fascinating. Actually, hold on. I think it's actually the Judges chapter 2. Here it is. Yeah, I was wrong. It's Judges chapter 2, verse 1. Now the angel of the Lord went up from Gilgal to Bochim, and he said, I brought you up from Egypt and brought you into the land that I swore to your fathers. I said, I will never break the covenant with you, and you shall make no covenant with the inhabitants of the land. You shall break down their altars, but you have not obeyed my voice. What is this you have done? So now I say, I will not drive them out before you, but they shall become thorns in your sides, and their God shall be a snare to you. As soon as the angel of the Lord spoke these words to all the people of Israel, the people lifted up their voices and wept. They called the place Bochim, and they sacrificed there to Yahweh. So remember, in Exodus, Yahweh says, look, I'm sending my angel before you. He's going to go, and he's going to bring you into the land. He's the guy. Don't rebel against him. He will not pardon your transgression. The people, by the time you get to the book of Judges, they're in the land. They rebel against him. The angel of Yahweh shows up and says, I told you guys, I brought you in here, and I told you to be faithful to me, and you didn't. So now I'm not going to pardon your transgression. I'm out of here. And so this being, whoever he is, takes up from the being in Exodus chapter 23, verse 20, and he fulfills it. They rebelled against him. He did not pardon their transgression, and the people freak out, because if the angel of the Yahweh is not with us, then Yahweh is not with us, because somehow he is Yahweh, but he's not Yahweh at the same time. So do you have any questions about that before I jump to the New Testament?
No, it's definitely good. I think when we get to the New Testament, I can address Free Naturalist comment in the chat real fast after that.
Okay. Yeah. Well, put it up now. That's cool.
Okay, we can hit it now. So he is saying, what I hear is that one God, three bodies of what the Godhead is. Muslims bring a good argument with identity. So let me frame this out real quick, just for anybody watching. There is an academia. They're looking into the metaphysics and the philosophy of the Trinity. No Christian believes that these are a contradiction. Initially, defining being in person differently means that there can't be a logical contradiction. Now, when you're laying out the Trinity, There's relative identity Trinitarianism, social Trinitarianism, Latin Trinitarianism. All these things I can bring you different arguments or why somebody would philosophically want to go to each. But when it comes to the law of identity, for example, Muslims have a double standard, and I'll try to make this quick. When you're looking at the Quran was revealed in different modes. Each one of those modes in totality, according to Sunni Muslims, are considered one Quran. Yet if I'm looking at the Hafs Quran, they'll tell me that's a complete Quran. They say that it's not missing anything. But then if I have Lost Quran right beside it, it has different words, different letterings, different vowelings in some cases. So by their own logic and how they critique the Trinity using Leibniz law, there are two different items there that they're claiming are one or are identical, but yet they're different. So the law of identity falls apart to them, and they're inconsistent in their methodology. I just wanted to spit that out real quick.
Yeah, the other thing is that to most Sunni Muslims, the Quran is the uncreated speech of Allah. That it's uncreated and that it's eternal. And they also believe that the Quran has being, that it exists in the real material world. So there is an uncreated aspect to the Quran and a created aspect to the Quran simultaneously. If you ask a Muslim, do you worship? So technically, we've got two uncreated beings, because you've got Allah, who's uncreated, and then you have the Quran, which is the speech of Allah, which is uncreated. If you were to ask a Muslim, do you worship the Quran? They'll say no. So you have two uncreated beings who are not each other, but one of them is worthy of worship. One of them is not. A person might say, well, that's Allah's attributes. That's fine. That means that Allah has at least two attributes. One is his primary nature, and two is his speech, which is uncreated. So, for example, Allah is merciful, but the mercy is contingent upon somebody to be merciful too. That's a temporal attribute. But the attribute of the uncreated speech of Allah would also, according to them, violate the law of identity. Look, the real mistake that I saw with Free Naturalist, and shout out to him, is that he says one God, three bodies of the one Godhead. We're anthropomorphizing God, and that's the mistake that's being made. God in his prime does not have a body. God is spirit, and what that is, in my mind, is still incomprehensible. I mean, I've got a sort of outlined idea. When we say spirit, we've got an outlined idea of what we think spirit is. But God in his prime doesn't have a body. And so what happens when you talk about the Trinity, a lot of mistakes that get made is that because humans only have other beings like us as reference points, we're thinking three separate bodies, and that we're saying that these three bodies are one thing. That's not what we're saying. We're not saying that there are three bodies in one God. What we're saying is that there is a distinction between being, what a person is, and person, who a person is. As I've discussed this with a very, very good friend of mine, a rock has being, but it does not have personhood. And a human being has being, but a human person is unipersonal, meaning for every human being, for every one human being, there's one person attached to him. All we're saying about God is that as to his being, whatever that is, whatever that essence of God is, and none of us knows. I don't think any Muslim would claim that they know what the essence of Allah is. When I say essence, I'm talking about what is he made up of? Plastic? What is that? What is God made up of? None of us know. And it's probably blasphemous to even say the word essence or made up of when we're talking about God. But again, God is merciful to us. We only have words like that to try to comprehend the incomprehensible, which is why he has to emanate himself to us in ways that we can understand. So that's what I would say to that. Okay, so remember, there's this being that Yahweh says, I'm going to send my angel before you, and you better listen to him and not rebel against him. And he won't forgive you if you do. My name is in him. Okay. Then you go to John. Let's go to John chapter 1 first. Because remember, John also creates this problem. No one has ever seen God. John, didn't you see all these passages? He showed up in the burning bush. He showed up in John 6 to Gideon. He showed up in, Judges 6 to Gideon. He showed up in Judges 2 to the people of Israel. He showed up in Genesis 18 to Abraham with the two other angels. He showed up in Genesis 19 when he firebombed Sodom and Gomorrah. He showed up in Genesis 3. What do you mean? No one has ever seen God, John, in John chapter 1, verse 18. And then it says, no one has ever seen God, the only God who is at the Father's side. He has made him known. Remember, in intertestamental Judaism, you had this concept of these emanations of God, and the job of the emanation of God is to make God known, is to be the bridge between the transcendent and the immanent, or between the divine and between the uncreated and the created. God carries his essence personally to his created beings. And what John is saying is that is who we're calling Jesus. So the person who's walking in the cool of the day to Adam and Eve, the person who spoke to Abraham from the earth, the person who spoke to Moses from the bush, the person who carried the children of Israel from Egypt to the promised land, the angel that you were supposed to listen to, the one who has God's name in him, that was the one that we were talking about all through the Old Testament. No one has seen God in his prime, but this second power who's at the side of God, and Philo says that this second being is at the right hand of God. He has made him known to us. That's his job, which is why he's called the angel all through the Old Testament. There's one other passage I forgot to give you guys in the Old Testament, and we got to go back there. I'm sorry, but it's one of my favorite passages of all time. It's a memory verse that I use all the time, and we got to go back there, okay? Because it's so fascinating. Jacob is dying, okay? He's dying. He's about to leave the world, and he's blessing his kid. And then he says, he blesses Joseph, and listen to what he says. The God before whom my fathers Abraham and Isaac walked, the God who has been my shepherd all my life long to this day. Now, if I were to ask you, what is the name, James, what is the name of the God of Abraham and Isaac?
Yahweh.
I agree. And he's talking, what is the name of the God who was the shepherd of Jacob all of his life?
I would still say Yahweh. That would be where they would land.
Yeah, we're talking about the same being. Now watch this. The God, Yahweh, before whom my fathers Abraham and Isaac walked. The God, Yahweh, who has been my shepherd all my life long to this day. The angel who has redeemed me from all evil. Bless the boys. It's the same being. And yet, when he gets to the third aspect, he calls him the angel, which is why when the angel of Yahweh shows up to Moses, he says, I am the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, because it was that angel or messenger or emanation of God who came and spoke to Abraham in the trees of Mamre, came and spoke to Isaac, came and spoke to Jacob. They understood that the being that they were talking to was somehow Yahweh and somehow distinct from Yahweh at the same time. They understood this. This isn't some random revelation that happened in the New Testament, which I was completely fine with. But that's not what's happening here. What's happening here is this is something that even the guys all the way back in Genesis understood. Jacob is a theologian, and of course it cannot be avoided that this was a tripartite blessing. The God 1, the God 2, and then the God 3, the angel. Do what you will with that. I don't think Jacob at the time had the complete revelation of the Trinity that you and I have. I don't think that Jacob could masterfully in 2 seconds, James, do what you just did with the, being in person and we've grown as a body.
Yeah, that's what Dr. Josh Sijuwadi was explaining to the Muslim metaphysician in that video that we watched, that Christianity has that connective tissue.
Yeah.
And Muslim metaphysician and others would say they don't need that for us as Christians, that would be yikes if we looked at the Old Testament
Correct.
and had nothing there to substantiate Christianity.
Yeah, we do need that because we're claiming that Jesus is a fulfillment of all this stuff. So if you're claiming that your religion is connected to the previous religion, then you've got to be able to point, and not like once or twice, but this is all through the Old Testament. I'm giving you guys a 35,000 foot summary here. And again, there's a difference between saying God sends messengers like Abraham or a prophet or an angel. There's never a time in the Old or New Testament where an angel is called Yahweh himself. Isaiah is never called Yahweh himself. Gabriel is never called Yahweh himself. The good angels and the good prophets always point people to Yahweh. But there's one specific being all the way from Genesis all the way down. As a matter of fact, in the book of Malachi, which ends the Christian Old Testament, in the book of Malachi, the Messiah is called the angel of the covenant. So from the beginning to the end of the Old Testament, you see one particular kind of angel who is called Yahweh, who has all the rights and privileges of Yahweh. He gets worshipped. He gets he forgives, or doesn't. Malachi 3:1-3. He gets worshipped. He forgives, and he doesn't forgive sins, etc., etc., etc. All the other angels say, "Whoa, I'm not the guy. Worship Yahweh." Okay. Now, John chapter 1, John says that was Jesus. So remember, in the intertestamental period in Judaism, you had this concept of Binatarianism. This concept that you had two powers or two beings or two persons, two something. Our forefathers in Judaism had a hard time putting it together. And I think that I think you'd agree with this, James, that our forefathers initially in the early church had a hard time putting this together. We're talking about something that's way over and way above our pay grade, but God is condescending to show us this is how it works. There's one being, one essence of God, and within that one being, there are three persons, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, etc. Now, remember, Yahweh says to the Israelites, you got to listen to this dude because my name is in him. And here we go to John chapter 17, one of my favorite passages. And you know, I was trying to bring this up to my Black Israelite friend, but he dodged this for obvious reasons. So here you see Jesus, he's praying to the Father. And you know, he says, I've manifested your name. I've brought your name. I've manifested your name. And remember, we said your name is your nature to the people that you gave me out of the world, etc., etc. Okay. Now watch this. Verse 12. While I was with them, I kept them in your name, which you have given me. There it is right there. While I was with them, I kept them in your name, which you have given me. This person, Jesus, carries the name within himself. And that's why he's saying, while I was with them, I was able to guard them. He had divine power to guard his folks. And so in Exodus 23, there's a specific type of angel who carries out the covenant because his name is in them. Is in this particular angel. And then John picks that up and says, yeah, that was Jesus. And just like that angel or being had the name of Yahweh within himself and made Yahweh known to them, so Jesus now in the New Testament, as he's initiating the new covenant, is doing the exact same thing. And so we have clear Old Testament precedent to speak of the Trinity, or speak of the multiplicity of the Godhead, or to speak of God being, who though being one, as Dr. Michael Brown said, is compound in his unity. So, go ahead.
I was going to say that's an excellent point, because if you're building your theology and you want to claim connective tissue to the previous revelation, something that our Muslim friends will also do, is they will target the Old Testament not speaking of Jesus Christ, but at the same time, they believe he was the Jewish Messiah. So while they're trying to build up this pedestal that he is the Messiah, every text that speaks of him, they chop it out from underneath themselves. So they end up literally defeating their own claim. It's also known as like a taxi cab fallacy. They'll go to like Bart Ehrman and they'll say Bart Ehrman says A, B, but then they hop out of the taxi cab before they get to C.
Right.
Bart Ehrman firmly believes Jesus Christ was crucified,
Yeah.
and that it is not an alternative fact of history.
Yes, and the other thing about that Bart Ehrman believes is that Bart Ehrman believes that Jesus' self-understanding was that he, oddly enough, is that he was an angel. Bart Ehrman says, I don't think that Jesus thought he was God, but he definitely thought he was an angel, which of course we would say, yeah, if you're talking about that specific angel, we agree, Bart. Which obviously would be blasphemous to our Muslim friends. And I do want to connect a little bit. The Messiah in the Old Testament with a divine being, because there are passages actually in the Old Testament that does that. So here you have the Psalms. Okay.
Let me know if you want to screen share again. I'm going to take a drink, and commit an Ali Dawa.
Okay. Shout out to Ali Dawa. As I'll wait. You know what I'll do is I'll interact a little bit with the comments, and then when you come back, we'll do the.
Oh no, I just had a quick drink, but we're fine to interact, and then I'll pull it up for you.
Okay, so Psalm chapter 104, very, very interesting, because it says something very, very, very interesting when you consider the rest of Scripture. So we know that there's this angelic divine being who is Yahweh, does all the things that Yahweh does, but he's called the angel. But then you have a very interesting passage in Psalm chapter 104. In Psalm chapter 104, it says, Yahweh wraps himself as light with a garment. He stretches out the heavens like a tent. He lays the beams of his upper chamber on their waters. He makes the clouds his chariot and rides on the wings of the wind. So Yahweh's Cadillac, his vehicle, the way that he gets around is clouds. He's a cloud rider. Now, obviously, there's this is to contra Baalism, because Baal is presented as riding on a cloud, etc., etc. And then you have this messianic prophecy in Daniel chapter 7. In Daniel chapter 7, you see something very, very interesting. Daniel has a vision of God, and somebody shows up to God in a very very significant vehicle. Daniel chapter 7, and you have verse 13. So let me hit screen share again, because so we saw in the Psalms that Yahweh is the cloud rider. He rides on the clouds of heaven. Okay. But then here we have in Daniel chapter 7, I saw in the night visions, and behold, with the clouds of heaven, there came one like a son of man. And he came, this is not Yahweh in his prime in a human form, because he says he came to the Ancient of Days, which is Yahweh in his prime, or what we would call God the Father, and was presented before him. To him was given dominion, glory, and a kingdom, that all peoples, nations, and languages should serve him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion which shall not pass away. His kingdom is one that shall not be destroyed. This is clearly a messianic vision. Now, some of our Jewish friends say, no, that's talking about Israel. Sorry, by the time you get to the end of the Jewish canon, Israel is a small little remnant, and they'll be happy to survive because they're all wicked and sinful. This is a specific son of man who rides on the clouds and ends up ruling the world. That's clearly a messianic allusion. But notice he's riding on the clouds. The only being that's spoken of as being the cloud rider all throughout the Old Testament, or the water walker, is Yahweh himself. But somehow there's this exalted Son of Man. And if you look at the intertestamental literature where our Jewish friends are speculating on this, they're like, who is this? And by the time you get really, really close, Metatron, there's this very interesting angel in intertestamental literature, Metatron, Metatron, I think, Metatron. Very, very interesting. I'll spell it for you later. Metatr.
To be honest, when I first heard the name of that and being, one of God's head angels, I was like, are they talking about the Transformers? Because 100%. That's exactly where my mind went.
100%, bro. That is exact. I actually thought it was a joke. I was like, oh, really? Metatron, huh? Okay. Because it sounds exactly like Megatron. Holy smokes. I was like, no way. But yeah, that one was really interesting because I was like, wow, that's crazy. But this passage, Daniel 7, is one of the main passages that the folks who believed in the two powers of heaven, that's the one where they really would speculate and go over and over again with it, because it was just like, wow, man, like, who is this guy that has all this power and authority and is at the point where he actually rides on the clouds? And then we know what New Testament passages we're going to go to with this one, right? Because Jesus is on trial, and they're looking for a cause to execute him. They're looking for a reason to kill him, and so Jesus obliges them in a very, very interesting perspective. Jesus says the following. Now, listen, it's not a capital crime to claim that you're the Messiah. Lots of other people before and after Jesus claimed that they were the Messiah. Here's the capital crime that Jesus committed. They said, verse 61, he remained silent, made no answer. Again, the high priest answered him, are you the Christ, the Son of the Blessed? Now, look how Jesus responds. I am. And you will see the Son of Man seated at the right hand of power. Remember power? We talked about that. Coming with the clouds of heaven. The high priest tore his garments and says, what further witnesses do we need? You have heard his blasphemy. Why is it blasphemous to say that you're at the right hand of the power and you are the one that's going to come with the clouds of heaven? Because the second power, the second divine essence, person, whatever, okay, was pictured as this person in Daniel 7. At the time of Jesus, the person that they were speculating, Metatron, the angel, whoever it was looked upon as the divine essence of Yahweh. So when Jesus says, I am, that's not, I'm the Messiah, that's not enough to get him executed. So he says, I'm seated at the right hand of the power, which means I'm the second power. And if I'm going to make it absolutely clear to you, I'm the one that's going to be coming on the clouds of heaven. I'm the guy Daniel has spoken of. We know that's a divine being. That is the blasphemy that got Jesus executed, actually, was that he was claiming to be the second power. He actually uses right hand of the power, or of power, because that was the language that they had at the time for the divine, the second divine person in Jewish Binatarian thought. And so Jesus saying that is what finally and totally got him executed. And so there's a clear connection. I'm going to do one more. It's Micah chapter 5. This is the one that I was working on with my Black Israelite friends. But you, Bethlehem Ephrathah, who are too little to be among the clans of Judah, from you shall come one forth for me, one who's to be ruler of Israel, whose coming forth is from days of old, from ancient days. Now, if you look at Micah 5, I've got a nifty little Bible software here that is pretty cool, but it's not cheap. I'll tell you that. It says his goings out is from the beginning. Okay, from ages upon ages. Okay, there is some being that was there from the beginning, from ages and ages. Now, some translation have days of old. The Black Israelites have a predilection with the King James version, which is really cool because the King James version of Micah 5:2 says that this is an eternal person. It says has been from old, from everlasting, is what the King James version says. How it translates aeon is that this is an everlasting person. So anyway, the point is, what's happening in the New Testament is they're simply taking those two powers passages in the Old Testament and applying it to Jesus. And that's the reason why you had these strictly monotheistic Jews who had no issue worshiping Jesus, saying things like to him who sits on the throne and to the Lamb. They had no problem grouping Jesus together and worshiping him because their forefathers did the same thing. Their forefathers sacrificed to this angel. Their forefathers worshiped this angel. This is the angel that revealed the divine name to him. This angel's job, or this messenger's job, or this emanation's job was to communicate the incommunicable attributes of God in his prime to his created beings. And there's a very, also just a very, on a practical level, that would also be his job for angels and cherubim and seraphim, because they know very little about Yahweh as well, because there's an infinite gap, as we said, between created beings and uncreated beings. So just like we need an emanation or a messenger to tell us what Yahweh is like, so do the angels. And so he's called the angel or the messenger because he has to communicate literally the incommunicable attributes of an uncreated being to the created being. And so the early Christians this was a seamless transition. This was a conversation in God's providence that they were all having, and it's very fascinating. They don't fight. They don't say there's no such thing as Metatron. They just say yeah. They just collapse it all into Jesus and say, yeah, that's the guy. And Jesus is saying, yeah, I'm the second power. And you're going to see me at the right hand of the power, and you're going to see me coming in the clouds of heaven. I am the essence or the emanation of Yahweh that communicates to everyone. And I'm also the angel of the covenant, which we saw in Malachi 3 is literally what the Messiah is called. The Messiah is called the angel of the covenant, connecting him. And so the first covenant was initiated in Exodus 3 with the people of God by the angel of Yahweh. I mean, every passage in every major moment in Jewish Christian history centers on this being. Whether it's Genesis 3, he's walking in the cool of the day. Whether it's Genesis, where he's meeting Abraham, who's the father of all these Abrahamic religions. Whether it's Exodus 3, when he's meeting with Moses, who's the great lawgiver among Islam, Judaism, and Christianity. And then into the New Testament, when we're talking about initiating the new covenant, it's always the same being, and there's seamless continuity between the two. So as Christians, we can be confident. This is not something where, look, if God randomly revealed the Trinity in the New Testament, I still wouldn't have a problem with it. God can reveal however he wants. But from the very beginning, God has revealed himself as compound in his unity or a multiplicity of persons. And I think that's pretty exciting.
Amen.
So yeah, there you go. So square circles or God has a caddy. Yes, God has a caddy, free naturalist. It's the clouds. That's how he gets around. he rides on clouds. So there you go.
To be honest, to the audience, when he said caddy, like I was trying to think, is there a Greek word caddy or like a Hebrew word? And I just finally, when you said that, it clicked. It shows my age.
Yeah. Is there a Greek word? Yeah. So yeah, man, that was I was watching a video. There's a Muslim dude, and there was this Christian guy, and the Muslim dude was like, yeah, we don't need any history or anything, because we'll just, the Quran is self-affirming, et cetera, et cetera. And look, if the Quran simply said, I'm a self-affirming document, we don't need any history, then fine. The problem is that the Quran connects itself to Christianity and Judaism. That's the problem. Right? So if the Quran said, look, this is a standalone thing, I'm coming up with something myself, or whatever, new religion, cool. But the Quran, obviously, in Surah 5, where it says he sent Musa with guidance and light. He gave the Zabur, the Psalms, to David. He gave Jesus the Gospels. It's Muhammad and the Quran that is trying to connect Islam to these other religions. So when you have a radical discontinuity in the essence of the divine being, to where you can't make, your phrase, connective tissue, that's a problem, right? So that's the issue. It's not that, hey, I'm a believing Muslim and I just have faith that the Quran is right and the Bible is wrong. That's not a problem by itself. The problem is that the Quran claims that it's in continuity, but there's no complex sacrificial system in the Quran. And as far as the divine being goes, you do not have, at least the way that the vast majority of Muslims talk about, you do not have a God who's complex in his unity in the Quran.
Yeah, and I often hear it's the criterion, but then there's so many different hadith and verses that are like, go back and look at what you already have, the Torah and the Injil. And then I'm thinking, well, there's no actual written Torah or Injil that seems to fit with what the Quran is. So why is he sending them to go look at things that have been completely corrupted? And then we know from like the Dead Sea Scrolls that the church didn't corrupt the Old Testament. 98% of what's in the Bible, you can still find preserved within the Dead Sea Scrolls. Now, there's some interesting things to talk about in there, but that doesn't speak to a large corruption. So if they want to tell me that the 2% that has issues or that they're looking into is where Muhammad is and where Islam is, I just don't buy it.
Yeah, and again, just specifically focusing on this aspect of theology, you could end up with Christian theology just using the Old Testament that you have for the Dead Sea Scrolls. You've got Genesis. All I did was do Genesis and Exodus mostly. And you can come up with a God who communicates, a God who's compound in his unity, multiple persons, but one God. You could do all that just from the Torah. A sacrificial system, a need for a priest. You could just do that with the first 5 books and come up with what we say about Christianity. All Christianity does is it collapses all of those concepts into one person. Right? That's the only thing. All Christianity does is it says, look, the Jesus is a temple, Jesus is a priest, Jesus is a sacrifice, Jesus is a second power. That's all we're saying. So you can just take that, and the Old Testament literally tells us that all this is going to happen, because the Old Testament tells us that while the sacrificial system is necessary, Psalm 51 makes it clear that sacrifices and offerings you didn't desire. And while an asham, that is an atonement, is necessary, it also tells us in Isaiah 53 that there is a perfect person who will become our asham. So all of the major tenets of Christianity can be found in the Old Testament that you have in the Dead Sea Scroll. Obviously, there's some really interesting stuff about Jeremiah. I'm sure that you're familiar with regarding the Dead Sea Scroll. That's really fun and fascinating to look at. But as far as the high points of Christology, you can recreate the entire thing in detail from the Old Testament. To me, that's just radically faith affirming. And aside from Islam, I mean, Islam's look, it came about 500-600 years later, right? From a guy who was admittedly not very well read, if not completely illiterate, who when he formulates the Trinity, it's the Father, Son, and Mary. That's the only formulation of the Trinity that you actually see in the Quran, where Allah supposedly confronts Jesus and says, "Did you tell them to worship me, you, and your mother?" And Jesus says, "No, I didn't tell them that. I would never say so, et cetera, et cetera." Actually, I think Dr. White actually asked Jake about this. And Jake kind of did one of these things, but there's no actual, there's say not three in the Quran, but there's no actual, Father, Son, Holy Spirit formulation of the Trinity ever in the formula. And no matter how radical you get as a Roman Catholic, as far as the Blessed Mother goes, no Roman Catholic, especially by the 6th century, had ever put Mary in the Trinity. They never booted out the Holy Spirit and added Mary into the Trinity. So my concern, Islam is, fun. My fascination with the topic really goes much well beyond Islam. I'm sure it does for you too. Obviously, anybody involved in talking to Muslims, there's going to be a lot of pay dirt you get by saying, no, this is the Old Testament. We see this clearly in the Old Testament, and we also see in the intertestamental literature. This is just clear fact. As I keep telling people, the first early Christians considered themselves so Jewish that they had to have a Zoom call to justify letting Gentiles in. Okay, so they did not look at the Trinity, or they did not look at worshiping Christ as some imposition of this new pagan ideology. They looked at worshiping Christ as something Jewish to the core. And
you can see like some of early Islam's misconceptions about Judaism and Christianity, like to start to look for Mecca, because Becca sounds like Mecca. They have to imply that these two are the same. Historically, that's not demonstratable at all. And then same things like with Muhammad and Muhammadin, and how they have to
Mahmadin, yeah.
Sorry, Mahmadin.
Yeah.
It's like,
yeah.
If you want to say that is Muhammad, everywhere that's used in the Old Testament, trust me, you do not want that to be applied to Muhammad.
Yeah, but isn't that kind of like the Ahmed Dot type of apologetics? Are modern, I've been out of the game for a while. Are modern Muslims really using that, or is that the 1980s stuff with Ahmed Dot?
So you still see some of that. You see that there's a lot of division within Sunni Islam, but they try not to be as public with it. Like they want to keep it very private in-house.
Yes, we saw that with the Yasser Qadhi situation.
Yeah. Now the big thing that's coming to light now is they're actually having to answer some questions about their scripture, and they're actually having to come to grips with, we can physically see these two words are not identical.
Correct.
And so, but now they're also trying a new approach, which is where they're looking at the philosophical view of the Trinity and just trying to say it doesn't make sense. But the fundamental problem is that they'll assert like yad, meaning for hand, is just like God has a hand, but it's not a hand like us. But we can't really describe to you what that hand fundamentally means. And there's all kinds of problems. Like they'll say that God is one, but technically you shouldn't even compare God numerically in their faith, depending on the school of thought. Right. So there's a lot of difference. Claims are all over the place, Vin. Primarily what their apologetics is, they believe, and they're going to hate me when I say this, but this is the way I perceive it. I perceive that they believe by pointing out that Christianity is false, somehow it makes Islam true, and that's why you don't see them defending Islam.
Well, it is weird when I see them quoting Bart Ehrman, because I'm like, well, I mean, you wouldn't accept it if I quoted an Orientalist. And even even philosophically, Muslims and Jake kind of admitted this when he said, even if we had no historical we believe it. The ultimate authority in Islam is not philosophical coherence. The ultimate authority is Allah and his messenger. So any philosophy or science or anything that contradicts the basic tenets of Allah and his messenger, they're de facto going to ignore it. So this idea that we should come at a belief in, or we can refute a God by philosophy when we won't hold ourselves to the same standard is kind of disingenuous, right? I'm sure there's lots of philosophical ideas I can come up with and say, oh, this is wrong. And even if it was right, they'd simply say, well, that's not our criteria for judging truth. It's Allah and his messenger, which is exactly what he did when we talked, when what was that brother's name? Joshua
Sijuwati,
yeah,
who was a great philosopher.
Yeah, when he talked about the lack of historical continuity, the response was, well, we don't need to be historically continuous, because to us, the ultimate standard is Allah and his messenger. Okay, so then you won't hold your belief system to any philosophical or historical or evidential claims, and yet you're trying to invalidate our religion by philosophical claims, as if you would subordinate your religion to philosophy. It makes no sense at all. At least from a biblical perspective, we can justify biblically certain philosophical ideologies because, biblically speaking, logic or logos is a person. We don't believe that logic or logos is some sort of like mist floating out in the ether. We believe it's directly connected to a person, a being, who communicates to us the ability to reason itself. That's what Paul means when he says that Christ is our wisdom in Colossians, or when John says Christ is our logos, he is our logic. And so even from a Christian worldview, you have an entire ability to talk about philosophy and reason and logic because it's centered around another person. But you don't have those discussions in the Quran. That's something that happens later. But the world that the New Testament was in was full of the confluence of Old Testament Judaism, and yet these new philosophies of Plato and Aristotle and all things like that. And they were able to sort of synthesize them into this amazing worldview. It's really, really unbelievable stuff. When you see a guy like Paul, and you see John with Philo and all the rest of them, these were brilliant men. The Bible is a collection of these books, whereas I think that's one of the weaknesses, I think, of our Muslim friends, is that there is a single source supposedly for the Quran. Supposedly, it came from from the Wahi, from Allah to Jibril to Muhammad, and then Muhammad had to get this dictated to him in over 23 years of revelation. And so because of that, any weaknesses that Muhammad have, or any ignorances that he has in regard to the religion he was critiquing, is obviously something that you're going to have to try to clean up on the back end, which is what we find our Muslim friends doing. But for the final time, there is a distinction between being in person. We do not believe that God in his prime has a physical body. So when we're talking about God, try as you might, Aquinas said God's essence is existence. Try to figure out what that means. To me, the fact that you have these two categories of being in person, or essence and energy, whatever you want to call them, is the fact that we can comprehend that idea, but we don't apprehend the details of it, is exactly what I would expect if a true divine being was communicating with me, right? So this silly thing where people mock and say, this doesn't make sense, I would just caution you. We don't even know how satellite technology works. Like, we know we went up to space somewhere, there's a satellite, and now me and you are talking, James, and there's a picture of me or a picture of you. But do we know the details exactly how that works? No. I've been listening to this, and maybe I'll jump back about this, James. The hard problem of consciousness. I don't know if you're familiar with that terminology.
It's actually what was the final tipping stone that got our good buddy Justin to become Khalil Allah and leave atheism.
Shout out to him. The hard problem of consciousness. Yeah. Something as fundamental as consciousness, we can't even explain. So here we are as human beings, and we're supposed to know the deep essence or nature of God completely in a way that's not mysterious. I would say that if there's no mystery about the God you made up, that's if the God you made up can fit in your head, then he came from your head. So what I would say is, look, if we've got logical categories that God graciously has given us, and we can make distinction between those logical categories, and the scripture says God can't deny himself, so logic can't deny himself. To say that one is that he is one in being and three in person is not a denial of himself. It's not a contradiction, and we should happily accept the fact that as created beings, that is completely mysterious to us, because we don't even know the first thing about ourselves, which is consciousness, and how we can, even if I say Yahweh commuted consciousness to me, great, but what does that do? How does that work? How does a brain, how does a immaterial essence of myself, how does that interface with the material essence of myself? These are all mysteries that the greatest theologians and philosophers still haven't figured out. So we haven't even figured out the basic points of what it means to be human. You say you have a soul. Where are, in Islam and Christianity, Judaism, we have souls. Where is the soul located? How does the soul interface with the physical body? We don't know. All we know is we have one. And we know that there's a confluence between soul and body, but the inner workings of it, we don't know. It's the same thing. So I should expect the same problems with God. And just like our atheist friends mock us and they go, well, where's your soul? How does it work? And we look at them and say, you're pretty silly. You look pretty ignorant. It's the same thing I feel when I see human beings saying, well, I can't understand the Trinity, so it must not be true. Yeah, I'll leave you guys with that. If your God can fit in your head, then he came from your head. That's what I'll say.
Nope, I like that. That would be a fun meme that somebody could clip out.
All right, man. I got to get this computer set up, but let's set something up with our daughter and your daughter. We could do a little collab so she can get more subs on her YouTube channel.
I think my kid would find that neat that she gets to do a collab with another kid.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah. Off
All right.
topic, do you find it reasonable to have a convincing methodology in confirming the existence of a claimed God? Yes, free naturalist, I do find that reasonable. What else that I find reasonable, though, is people that do not, modern atheists say, I'm not an atheist in the sense of I am against God, or, they just say I don't have a belief in God or gods. What I would love to see from my modern atheist friends is I would like them to justify things like life and consciousness and logic. Even if you say you don't believe in God, you need to come up with a reasonable worldview that explains the basics and the essence of life here. So just because you say, I have a lack of belief in God or gods, okay, if you lack belief in God or gods, that means you believe that currently speaking, you don't see any evidence for God in the universe. Great. So then get me a comprehensive worldview that explains consciousness, life, morality, logic, etc. Metaphysics. That's something where I feel like our atheist friends are really lacking here. So while I do believe it's reasonable to create a methodology that justifies God, I also believe that it's also reasonable to create a methodology that justifies the universe without God. And it seems that modern atheists are not very keen on doing that. So that's what I'd say to that. And I'm not saying, I don't know you, Free Natural. It's the first time we've interacted. I would love to see them ditch the Rockstar new atheist. Shout out to Aaron Ra. We had a 3-hour conversation with Aaron Ra. He's a good dude, very generous with his time. That's one where I think he'd probably take that one back, huh?
Yeah. I appreciate you coming on. For those viewing this, tomorrow I have Dr. Khalil Andani coming on, and we're going to be discussing Tawheed. So he is going to be laying out different views and concepts of the oneness of Allah and how different Islamic sects and groups see this.
Oh, cool. I'll be checking in on it. He's a Muslim himself, I'm assuming.
Yes, he is from a small subgroup in Shia Islam.
Oh, okay. So I'll definitely be up on that one then for sure.
And he's going to be conveying different perspectives throughout. And I think we're going to talk about some potential contradictions and some things that people may run into. I probably won't do much talking because he's an academic and he knows that subject way better than I do.
Yeah, I'll definitely be checking out. All right, guys, I got to get out of here. Vin out.
Yeah, take care, buddy. I'm going to run the outro. I haven't thought of anything catchy to ever say to end these videos. So thanks for watching, guys. I definitely appreciate it. Oh, I'm also supposed to say like and subscribe if you enjoy the video. I'm bad about that. Take care, everybody.
I go hard in the paint, yeah, homie, I'm a saint.
Ride or die.